Hi guys, the Chancellor of the Exchequer Jeremy Hunt is currently tasked with bringing down inflation. Now the Bank of England uses interest rate hikes to fight rising costs, while the government on the other hand has the ability through policies. But while the media will generally quote inflation at 11.1%, for the poorest in society it's more like 16%. Here Sky News explains how the richest in society are much better protected while the poorest are more exposed to rising costs. Have a listen.
Food inflation, I mentioned it. It has been really painful for consumers. 16.4% year on year to October. That's how much more a basket of shopping is costing. You see the rise here. It coincides with the general inflation figure. And since the war in Ukraine began, feed, fuel, fertiliser, all the components of agriculture, all involve energy, all getting more expensive, and we're feeling it at the checkout. Now, this inflation does not fall evenly across income groups. This is the population split up into deciles, with the richest in the country at this end back to the poorest. And look at the real inflation figure for the very poorest, 12.5%, 11.9%, 12.5% for the poorest third of the population. Compare that to real inflation for the richest, under 10% for the very richest. That's because the poor spend more of their income on food and fuel than the richest. So they are feeling this inflation harder than anyone.
And that's why it's so important that public services are not cut. That's why it's so important that there is more support for people on the lower end of the economic scale. Because as we know, the richest in society can absorb these costs. As he said here, the poorest in society spend more of their income on food and fuel. And these are the things that are rising at the moment. This is the job of government, is to look after the poorest in society, to make sure that they have what they need. And they need public services. They rely on public services. They rely on support through universal credit, through benefits, but also public services need to be maintained. Because when it comes, for example, to the NHS, the richest in society can go privately. If public services are cut, they can rely on private services. This is why it's so important that public services are supported, because they support the poorest in society. It's not just about income. It's not just about rising costs of food and fuel, but it's also about public services. If they're not protected, then it's going to be much worse for the poorest in society, as we know. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.